this was one I am like a crusader on. I would get out a picket sign and hoist this in front of Persia Studios if I could, assuming I didn't get blown up trying to get there. A Grumman line. We need a Grumman line. We need to separate that carrier line, that carrier multi-role line, because there's a pseudo land fighter line, but there's no naval fighter line. And we need that. I get that where Persia is trying to go with this line right here from the P-12, F-2F, F-3F, F-2A, F-4F, but we should really have the Grummans as their own line, because, oh my lord. You can't ignore the F-6F. You can't ignore the Bearcat. You can't ignore the... It's...
Cougar.
The Cougar. You can't ignore the Cougar.
Yep. Nope. and I mean, there have been people bugging for the F6F for ever and ever and ever. And there's always been some gripe about it being behind licensing. I suspect that there's a way around that. Some that one has been sold to, let's say, Australia or Great Britain, and so I mean it's possible to get it into the game. The question is really is it a hard no, or is it a hey, this might be possible if we applied resources? Now that's a sticky situation, right? Because they don't have resources to throw at it. And so if you want the F6F in the game, they have to submit some amount of licensing money. And how much is that? I don't know. They're remarkably closed-mouthed about this whole business. So,
and that is understandable. However, I'll also point this out. You mentioned loopholes, right? So is it... I'm just being theoretical here. For that licensing, is it a specific F6F model? Because there are multiple.
Yeah.
There's... I mean... You could just look at the Tech Tree Considerations America section I have in the game discussion forums. I did a perfect split between the Corsairs, or the Vought line. I made a Vought line, and I made a Grumman line. The Vought line starts with the Vought FU, goes to the XF2U, XF3U. There's a Brewster F3A1, which is basically a shitty Corsair. Then you get to the F4U1. On the Grumman side, you have the very first version of the F6F, the F6F1, and then the 7 is the XF6F6, which is basically the final version of the Hellcat. And then it goes to the Bearcat.
Okay. And the thing is, too, that the Bearcat would be absolutely wicked at Tier 8. I could see that as a sort of tourney, fast, but with machine guns, right? So it'd be not as much altitude as the Mustang, turnier than the Mustang,
yes,
or
absolutely.
the LA9.
Yes.
Not quite as turny as the KI-94, not quite as turny as the Spitfire, or the Yak-15. But
oh heavens, faster. No, not the Yak-15. So yes, I will
much faster.
Yes, I will double down on what you said here. You've made some points that I totally agree with. I think the Grumman line would be a slight inverse of the North American line. You will have, at first, parable firepower, slightly better turn times, at first, ordnance options, But then it starts to get into dedicated fighters, and these fighters will be better to turn initially than the North American planes. The firepower will actually be somewhat better. So I'd say maybe the final version of the first version of the Hellcat might have the same machine guns as are on the P-47N, for instance.
I got you. Sure.
Then the final version, the XF6F6, I know that's a mouthful to say, might have the same machine guns that are found on the XP-72.
Okay.
So basically tier 10 machine guns on a tier 8 fighter, or maybe even 4 20mm cannons. Possibly, maybe.
Right.
Then after the Bearcat, they start to turn a bit stiffer than the FG1 and the Sabre, but they still have better firepowers, which will absolve the whole argument of making a Sabre with 20mm cannons.
Right.
Which,
yes.
Those were also a thing, mind you. The late Sabres were like that. In fact, I even mentioned that, God forbid, even if superplanes become a thing in World of Warplanes, which, I mean, because, mind you, ships has those. There are super ships in World of Warships. If Persia, by some miracle, manages to copy that, there's an open avenue to allow the Sabre to module itself into the F-86H, which had 20mm cannons, 4 of them.
Right, and so this gets into game balance. So the one of the topics that folks sometimes don't want to discuss because it's controversial, and it's controversial for a reason. It's about game balance and about how the high tiers are these days, right? So let's just imagine that the F-86 is currently a pretty good fighter, and it does a pretty good job. It takes a little while to get kills, but it's fast. It has good altitude, and and it's really turny. So not as turny as the Yaks, but still, it's pretty turny.
It can become pretty parable with a Yak 30. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. So you've got that. You've got those attributes, and now you're going to give it 20mm cannons. And all of a sudden, now this plane is head and shoulders above the other light fighters, but you've still got this meta where bombers rule the skies. And bombers rule the skies because they can just go as fast as they can back and forth between mining plants and just blow them up. And that's super awesome for bombers and the folks that love bombers. And super sucks for the rest of us that don't want to play bombers like you and I. Or we do play bombers, but we play them when we have to, right?
Generally.
Generally.